Hi, Gonzalo. Great to see you. We launched a year ago, and I haven't seen you since then. I've seen you 1,000 times on Zoom. It's been an amazing year since the launch of the Race to Zero June last year. Give us your summary. How far have we come?
Well, my friend, what a year it's been. Across the world, economies and definitely societies have ground to a halt due to COVID, and we have to recognize that it has been really hard, which is still the COVID is still plaguing many countries and devastating societies. But yet, against the odds, the last 12 months have been unprecedented in climate action. Non-state actors across society all around the globe continue to mobilize around the guiding star of net zero, and the momentum behind net zero commitments has definitely accelerated exponentially. We are really seeing an exponential growth curve in the number of non-state actors joining Race to Zero across all of society, with now well over 4,000 members. It has been really invigorating to bring in not only some major new companies like Google, Apple, Engie, Walmart, Maersk, but also some new global cities and regions, from Minas Gerais and Recife in Brazil to Mumbai in India and many others around the world. Leading educational global institutions, the most renowned financial players, and now even healthcare institutions, as just last month. So Nigel, what have we learned in this year?
Well, apart from figuring out how to use Zoom and Google and every other platform, I think we've really seen the power of radical collaboration. That there's a thirst to collaborate across, I mean, within businesses, but across regions, across supply chains, with cities and businesses, and it's that radical collaboration that really moves the dial. And we've seen that through all the Race to Zero sessions during this summit, that we need everybody individually, all the non-state actors, to be racing as fast as they can, but also working together. I mean, I think we've seen the cities and regions showing how they can bridge the gap between national governments and the real economy, and how actors within an industry along a full value chain need to work in tandem, like we've seen in the transport sectors. And I think we've also seen that this needs to be about intergenerational collaboration, not intergenerational friction, and that we're seeing different generations supporting each other. I think the session on engaging youth really highlighted that clearly. I mean, we've also seen that momentum in terms of aligning around this North Star of zero in the 2040s, as we like to say, to keep the pressure up, is critical, but not enough. We saw the ECIU report that showed that over 70% of the global economy is covered by net zero targets, but only a subset, and that those in the Race to Zero, are working towards the highest standard of what is needed to deliver on the promise of Paris. So we need to really make sure that those commitments made by members in the Race to Zero are now delivering against those targets, those short-term targets. And I think the session on impact of net zero was really insightful for us understanding how we do this. So I think it's important that we need to, and I think maybe we've been a bit surprised at how quickly net zero has been taken up. So I think now we're one of the big lessons is we have to translate that ambition and commitment into radical action and radical collaboration that makes a difference in the next 10 years. And I think we've got to shine a light on the fact that the Race to Zero is a huge collaboration itself, with partners doing amazing things. I mean, the initial cohort of companies in the business ambition for 1.5 collectively reduced their annual emissions by 25% between 2015 and 2019. So that alone is a reduction of 302 million tons. And now we've got the SMEs coming in the game. We've got the SME Climate Hub, of course, with the International Chamber of Commerce Exponential Roadmap, and Women in Business collaborating. Very quickly, we've got over 700 SMEs the game. Of course, the work that you've done with the B Corp movement, we've got hundreds of B Corp companies in. Many of those B Corp companies and SMEs have committed to net zero by 2030. I mean, really raising the bar. We've seen some very big companies join the climate pledge. Big companies like Unilever and Ørsted joining Amazon and others to pledge to, as they say, Paris 10 years early. Which I think that's a cry for ambition that we love. Second Nature, working with universities to track their emissions and bringing higher education in, so important to have those. I think all schools and universities, we want to be in the race, right? So that they become laboratories for learning and innovation. And of course, the cities, amazing. Cities Race to Zero, delivering really bold action. I think mayors continuing to show their role as sort of global leaders, reducing waste, creating jobs, investing in public services, and giving space back to people. Of course, we've also seen with Mark Carney a few weeks ago launching the Glasgow Finance Alliance for Net Zero. I mean, that's huge, 160 plus firms, $70 trillion. So I think also it's really, really important that recognize this is not a topic that is of interest to a small group of people. This is being discussed by citizens of every nation all around the world. And in articles like The Conversation and in citizens' assemblies across the world. And I think we're really excited to be seeing there's a global citizens' assembly coming together to present some recommendations to Glasgow. I think we've also seen some critiques of Race to Zero, but some of them have been a bit frustrating because it feels like people haven't read everything that we've written, but some of them really well founded, and I think we've been really important to recognise that a high profile campaign needs to listen to input from concerned civil society groups all around the world to help us make it better. I think it's really clear that input will help hold us accountable as champions with our mandate, but also all the actors in the Race to Zero and of course national governments. So to make sure, and I think this is the big theme, that the promises are delivered. And whether that's shareholders, we've seen some recent very big moves from shareholders, whether that's citizens, and again we've seen some big court cases recently, or whether that's voters. They're all watching the people who are making these commitments to make sure they live up to them. So I think we've seen amazing progress from our partners, but Gonzalo, we're in the last 5 months before Glasgow, so eyes are turning to what happens there in November. How do you think the campaign's going to contribute to making the COP a success?
Well, I believe that definitely. I think that we're living in a moment where net zero is becoming a new norm, and therefore setting a new stage, a new standard for all non-state actors around the world, and definitely related very well with the government, not only commitment to that action. And we know too well that national governments cannot single-handed the delivery of the promise of Paris. We need to activate and accelerate the ambition loop, and we have been speaking about this as our ultimate goal, right? And we understand the ambition loop is absolutely critical to continue driving upwards to have the emission by 2030 and deliver on the zero carbon world by 2050, the latest. So positioning in the ambition loop and the importance of it allows us to understand how much net zero, not only as a campaign, but as a new common narrative, is helping to mobilize the ambition and the action faster in terms of climate. We've seen this very explicitly outlined in the G7 Climate and Environment Ministers communique from last month, something that fulfill a lot of our a lot of enthusiasm from ourselves, but also set a new bar for many, not only nations but also non-state actors around the world. We need to see how all of this at the end is reflected in the transformative role of the policies and actions of all governments, going hand in hand with public and private stakeholders, that then can create the right enabling environment to support climate action and then integrate climate change into economic and financial decision making, not only in the long run, but mostly in this critical decade, and mostly in these next 5 years. We want to see all of that being implemented and mobilizing all non-state actors, again, activating the ambition loop and creating the condition for, as you expressed, the radical collaboration that is required to fulfill all of this agenda. We want to see how much of the radical collaboration among non-state actors is more and more critical for achieving a global economy through also just transition. But it's not only about radical collaboration between national government and non-state actors. We see also how the radical collaboration through cities and some national governments are helping to set the conditions for the collaboration across all sectors, all actors, I would say, on a horizontal way in value chains, but also in a vertical way in certain geographies. And even within sectors, we need to see how they can work together. The breakout session on transport highlighted the importance of all actors within the industry to come together. Demand side, supply side, financial sector, policymakers, civil society, voters, as you're saying, are all important to develop a mechanism that puts together a transport sector towards the needed net zero economy that we need. Of course, recognizing the need for a just transition is also what prompted us to launch Race to Resilience, the sibling campaign to Race to Zero, because we know that mitigation and adaptation have to be treated as two sides of the same coin. We know and we recognize that many times the agenda has been focusing much more on mitigation and not that much into adaptation and resilience. And mostly when it comes to non-state actors, we see that bias. And therefore, positioning Race to Resilience and people in the center with a focus on just transition has been so important, because has allowed us to mobilize a much more balanced agenda and therefore mobilize much more of the non-state actors towards the general agenda and not just one focus of it. It's about a successful COP, but it's also about looking beyond COP, and meaning beyond COP26, working for the following COP, and also working beyond a COP itself, mobilizing people in the different sectors, whether they are related to the process or not. And we are really excited to involve you all in the discussions around the future legacy for this campaign. We need to all decide and shape this together. This is an agenda that will take us all, and which we must all be involved. It will be great, my friend, to think about what needs to happen in the future of Race to Zero. So back to you.
Yeah, I think. I mean, of course, there's long term, but right now, I think that I think what we're both very conscious of is the need to keep. I mean, it's only a year old, right? I think I'm again really amazed with what partners have done, but really also recognizing that it's young and we need to keep learning and developing the campaign. And because of that, we want to make sure that that many partners, because this is not, we've maybe triggered it, but this is a campaign with many partners, shape the future together, because it's so important. So we want to really involve as many partners as possible in determining the future of the Race to Zero, so that it goes from strength to strength. And so I'm really excited that we're going to kick off at the end of this month a public consultation process. And there's some questions in particular that we're going to be asking for people's feedback on. So people who are listening can be thinking about these already. First of all, what makes a verifiable plan? I mean, ultimately, it won't be enough just to say we commit. You know, part of the requirements of Race to Zero is that you also have a plan. What makes a good plan and a verifiable plan? Secondly, progress tracking. How can we best track action and progress so that the transparency requirement that we already have leads to all of those actors we talked about, you know, shareholders, citizens, investors, are able to see who's keeping their promises. And a third question that comes up a lot is around policy and integrity. How to make sure that people who are committing to and are planning to go to net zero are also engaging in policy advocacy in a way which is consistent. I mean, can we expect more of individuals, given that we're not running the individual initiatives, but and how to measure that as well? I mean, it's a clear idea, but how can you actually track that in a robust way? But so, how do we bring in the issue of policy and advocacy integrity? And then finally, reporting. Like, what should we publish on a regular basis to track progress? I mean, it's clear that if 10,000 people join the Race to Zero, not all of them will succeed, right? So we know that we've always said that joining the race is not enough. You don't get a medal for joining the race. You've got to run around fast enough. But how do we, what can we do year after year to report on progress, to hold ourselves and all of our partners to account for the commitments that we're making in the movement that we're trying to generate? I think so. Those are the four big questions about plans, about progress tracking, about policy, and about overall tracking of the campaign. I think as you and I discussed, we've been really pleasantly surprised at how quickly the world is aligning around net zero in the 2040s, as we said, because it's a race, and we're getting more and more dates that are earlier than 2050, and how so that we really do have to focus on the next 10 years, the 50% reduction by 2030. So I think that by November, that's the key thing for me, is that we see a shift from just concentrating on building momentum on commitments to really focusing on credibility of action. That really fits with the work that all the Marrakesh partners have done on the climate action pathways and the Race to Zero breakthroughs, of course, which are all about getting critical mass of momentum and then turning it into actions, whether it's on hydrogen or shipping or agriculture or the built environment. I think that's going to be an exciting opportunity to make Glasgow the real pivot from momentum to action. And on that note, I think I'd just like to wrap up by saying a huge thank you to all of our partners. I mean, the partners running initiatives within the Race to Zero, of course, but also the hundreds of members of the Marrakesh Partnership who've been working on those climate action pathways and who are mobilizing momentum on climate action every hour of every day all around the world, and driving action in the Race to Zero and the Race to Zero Resilience, as you mentioned. And by the way, we should just acknowledge that in the G7 Climate Environment Ministers communique, they mentioned the Marrakesh Partnership twice and the Race to Resilience once and the Race to Zero. So in real testimony to the amazing work that huge global community have been doing, been recognised by the state actors. So looking forward to that momentum building on the road to Glasgow. And with that, I'll sign off and hand back to you, Gonzalo.
Thank you, my friend. And echoing your words, I think that it's a moment to thank our amazing partners, even recognizing that it would have been fantastic to be together in one room celebrating this first anniversary, mostly of the sense of community that has been built, the capacity of this incredible group of partners to align in one common goal and definitely work together in order to improve this on time. So we want to thank and celebrate the existence, but the amazing work that you're doing. We're looking forward to seeing many of you at London Climate Action Week in June, also at the Regional Climate Action Weeks in Africa, also in June, and the Asia Pacific Climate Week in July, and of course the Climate Week in New York City in September. Looking forward to see you. If it's virtual, we will be delighted to be with you, and if it's in person, even better. Thanks so much. Goodbye. See you soon. Let's keep it up.